The rain had been falling over Tower of London for hours. Not heavy rain. Not a storm. Just slow, cold rain that seemed to cover the old stone walls with silence. The kind of silence that feels normal to everyone, except the people who know what once happened inside those walls. Because more than 500 years ago, two young princes entered the tower. And they were never seen again. The day that changed England forever. In the spring of 1483, the entire country of England was waiting for something important. The king had died suddenly, and the throne now belonged to a boy, not a man, not a soldier, not a ruler, but a child. His name was Edward. History would later remember him as Edward V. He was only 12 years old. A child king in a country that had already seen too much violence, too much betrayal, and too many wars. England was still trying to recover from the long and brutal conflict known as the Wars of the Roses, a war where brothers fought brothers, and families destroyed each other for power. Now the throne belonged to a boy who did not even understand how dangerous the crown could be. And that is where the mystery began. The man everyone feared. When young Edward V became king, one man suddenly became the most powerful person in England. Not the king himself. Not the royal court. But his uncle. Richard III. At first, he did not take the throne. He only said he wanted to protect his nephew. He promised to help the young king until he was old enough to rule alone. Many people believed him. Many people trusted him. But others were not so sure. Because history had already shown what happens when power becomes more important than loyalty. The journey to London. The young king, Edward V, was traveling to London to officially become king. He was not alone. His younger brother, Richard of Shrewsbury, would join him later. To the people watching from the roads, it looked like a normal royal journey. Horses, guards, royal banners, and crowds of people waiting to see their new king. But behind the scenes, something was changing. The uncle who promised to protect him was slowly taking control. And nobody realized how dangerous that would become. The tower that was supposed to protect them. When the young king finally reached London, he was taken to a place that looked strong, safe, and impossible to escape from, Tower of London. People were told this was normal. Future kings often stayed there before their coronation. It was not a prison. It was a royal residence. A place of safety. But history would later prove something terrifying. Once the princes entered the tower, they never came out again. The second prince arrives. A few weeks later, the younger brother finally arrived. Richard of Shrewsbury was only 9 years old. He was younger, quieter, and more afraid than his brother. People who saw him later said he looked confused. He did not understand why they had to stay inside the tower for so long. But the country was still waiting for the coronation of Edward V. That coronation never happened. The day they were last seen. At first, people inside the Tower of London saw the two princes almost every day. They walked in the courtyard. They talked to guards. They looked out of the windows. They behaved like normal children who were waiting for something important. But then something changed. The princes stopped coming outside. At first, nobody worried. People thought they were sick. Some thought the coronation had been delayed. Others believed the king's uncle was simply protecting them from danger. But days passed. Then weeks passed. And the princes were never seen again. The crown that changed everything. Soon after the princes disappeared from public view, something happened that shocked the entire country. The uncle who had promised to protect them was suddenly crowned king. Richard III. Some people believed the princes were still alive somewhere inside the tower. Others believed they had been secretly moved to another castle. And some believed something much darker had happened, something nobody wanted to say out loud. Because if the princes were dead, then someone had to be responsible. And there was only one person who had the power to make it happen. The beginning of one of history's greatest mysteries. Even today, more than 500 years later, historians still ask the same question. What really happened to the two princes inside the Tower of London? Were they killed? Were they hidden? Or did someone remove them secretly to protect them? Nobody knows the full truth. And that is why this story is still one of the most disturbing mysteries in history. By the summer of 1483, something inside the Tower of London had changed. The guards still stood at the gates. The royal flag still moved slowly in the wind. The people in London still believed the young king was somewhere inside those thick stone walls. But the truth was becoming darker day by day. Because no one had seen Edward V or his younger brother Richard of Shrewsbury for many weeks. At first, people whispered quietly. They did not want to believe that something terrible had happened. England had already suffered too much during the Wars of the Roses. The country did not want another tragedy. But the silence inside the tower was starting to feel frightening. The servant who spoke too much. According to later stories, one of the servants working near the Tower of London claimed that he had seen the two princes for the last time near a window. They were not playing. They were not laughing. They were only looking outside, as if they were waiting for someone to help them. The servant later said that the younger prince, Richard of Shrewsbury, looked frightened. The older one, Edward V, looked calm, but not like a child anymore. He looked like someone who understood that something was wrong. After that day, the servant never saw them again. The man who became king. Only a short time later, the man who had promised to protect them was officially crowned King of England. Richard III. The ceremony was grand. The church was full. The people were told that the young princes were not the rightful heirs. They were told that the new king had every right to take the throne. Many people believed the story. Others did not. But one question remained in the minds of those who were brave enough to ask it. If the princes were not important anymore, where were they? And why had no one seen them? The rumors that spread across England. Rumors began to spread quickly across the country. Some people believed the princes had been secretly moved to another castle. Over the following months, several other young women disappeared from different areas of Washington. Many of them were college students. They were intelligent, active, and living normal lives before suddenly vanishing. Some of the victims disappeared from crowded public places. Others vanished while walking across university campuses. Friends and family members were shocked. How could someone disappear in the middle of busy cities without anyone noticing? But investigators began to notice a disturbing pattern. Witnesses from multiple locations reported seeing a polite young man asking women for help. He often wore a sling or cast on his arm. Sometimes he claimed he had injured his arm and needed help carrying books or loading something into his car. Because he looked harmless and well-educated, many women agreed to help him. That simple act of kindness often became the last moment anyone ever saw them alive. The man named Ted. In several witness statements, the same detail appeared again and again. The mysterious man introduced himself with a simple name. Ted. At the time, this seemed like a small and unimportant detail. But as the number of disappearances increased, investigators realized that this name might be a crucial clue. The man witnesses described had dark hair, a calm voice, and a friendly personality. He appeared confident and intelligent. Many witnesses even said they trusted him immediately. But behind that friendly smile was the predator known as Ted Bundy. The Lake Sammamish Incident. One of the most shocking events occurred in July 1974 at Lake Sammamish. The lake was crowded with people enjoying a warm summer day. Families were swimming. Students were relaxing on the beach. It seemed like the safest possible place. But even in this busy environment, Bundy managed to find victims. Witnesses later reported seeing a well-dressed young man wearing a fake arm sling. No one has been able to prove the truth completely. And that is why this story is still considered one of the greatest mysteries in history. By the autumn of 1483, the silence inside the Tower of London had become impossible to ignore. At first, the people of London had believed the young king was simply being protected. But now months had passed, and no one had seen Edward V or his younger brother Richard of Shrewsbury anywhere. Even the guards who once spoke confidently had stopped talking about the princes. It was as if they had never existed. The story that spread in secret. At the same time, another story began spreading quietly across England. People did not talk about it loudly. They whispered it in markets, in churches, and in small houses far away from the royal court. The story said that the two princes had been killed secretly inside the Tower of London. No one knew who started the rumor. No one knew who had seen anything. But the story spread so quickly that even people in faraway villages began to believe it. The fear was not only about what had happened to the princes. The fear was about who could have done it. The man everyone began to suspect. Soon, more and more people began to suspect one man. Richard III. He had power. He had control over the tower. And most importantly, he had something to gain. Because if Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury were alive, they would always be a threat to his throne. But even those who believed he was responsible were afraid to say it openly. Later that same year, a rebellion began in England. Many people who supported the royal family believed that the princes were dead and that the new king had taken the throne unfairly. The rebellion failed, but it showed something important. The people of England no longer trusted the king. And the disappearance of the princes had become more than a mystery. It had become a political disaster. The mother who still waited. While the country was changing, the prince's mother, Elizabeth Woodville, was still waiting for news. Some historians believe she knew the truth but could not prove it. Others believe she hoped her sons were still alive somewhere far away. But one thing is certain. She never received proof that they were dead. And that uncertainty made the story even more painful. The tower's dark secret grows. As the months passed, the Tower of London slowly became a place people feared. It was no longer only a royal building. It became a symbol of silence, a place where the truth could disappear forever. Visitors who walked near the walls began to say the same thing: the tower did not feel normal anymore. It felt heavy, quiet, and full of secrets. And at the center of that silence were two children who had never been seen again. The story that survived for centuries. Even after the death of Richard III, the mystery did not end. New kings came. New wars began. England changed completely. But one question continued to survive through every generation. What really happened to the princes inside the Tower of London? Historians searched for proof. Writers tried to explain the mystery. Some believed the princes were murdered. Others believed they escaped secretly. But no one could prove the truth completely. The beginning of the darkest theory. The most disturbing theory began to appear many years later. According to this theory, the two princes were killed quietly inside the tower and buried secretly so that no one would ever find them. If that theory is true, it means one of the most powerful crimes in English history was never officially solved. And that is what makes this story so frightening. Because sometimes the biggest mysteries in history are not the ones we cannot understand. They are the ones we understand too well, but cannot prove. By the beginning of 1484, something had changed in England forever. People no longer asked whether Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury were still inside the Tower of London. Instead, they began asking a darker question. Were they still alive at all? The silence had lasted too long. The guards no longer spoke about them. The royal court no longer mentioned their names. Even the people who had once supported the princes were beginning to feel something terrible had happened, something nobody could prove, but nobody could forget. The story that terrified the royal court. One of the darkest stories began spreading quietly across London. According to this story, the two young princes had been seen for the last time late at night inside the Tower of London. A servant claimed he had seen the younger prince, Richard of Shrewsbury, crying and asking when they would be allowed to leave. The older brother, Edward V, was said to be standing near the window, looking outside as if he understood something the others did not. No one could confirm this story. But it spread quickly because it felt real. It sounded like something that could have happened inside those dark stone walls. And that is what made it frightening. The man who had the most to gain. By now, almost everyone in England suspected one man. Richard III. Some people believed he had ordered the princes to be killed. Others believed someone had done it secretly to please him. And some believed the truth was even more complicated, that the princes had been removed quietly so no one could ever use them against the king. What made the mystery even more disturbing was this. Richard III never officially explained what had happened to his nephews. He never showed proof that they were alive. He never announced their deaths. He never answered the questions people were asking. The silence only made the suspicion stronger. Historians have tried for centuries to discover what really happened inside the Tower of London during the summer of 1483. But the truth is that no official record exists. No witness wrote down what happened that night. No guard admitted seeing anything. No document explained where the princes had gone. It was as if the truth had been erased completely. Some historians believe the princes were killed quietly in their sleep. Others believe they were moved secretly to another place where they later died. And a few historians believe something even more shocking, that the princes may have survived longer than anyone imagined. But without proof, the mystery only grew darker. The mother who never received an answer. While historians continue to argue, one person never received the truth, Elizabeth Woodville. She had already lost her husband. Now she had also lost her sons, but without proof, without confirmation, and without closure. Some stories say she believed they were still alive somewhere. Others say she feared the truth but did not want to accept it. What makes the story even more emotional is this. She never received a message. She never saw their bodies. She never heard a final explanation. For a mother, the mystery never ended. The tower becomes a symbol of fear. After the disappearance of the princes, the Tower of London slowly became more than a royal castle. It became a symbol of silence, a place where the truth could disappear forever. People who walked near the walls began to feel something strange. Even centuries later, visitors would still say the same thing, the tower did not feel like a normal place. It felt heavy, quiet, and full of secrets. And at the center of that silence were two children who had once been kings. Years passed. Kings changed. England changed completely. But the mystery did not disappear. Instead, it became one of the most famous historical mysteries in the world. Many historians believe Richard III was responsible. Others believe one of his supporters may have done it without telling him. And some historians believe the princes were secretly removed to protect them from political enemies. But no theory has ever been proven completely. And that is why this story still feels unfinished. The question that still exists today. Even today, more than 500 years later, historians still ask the same question. What really happened to Edward V and Richard of Shrewsbury inside the Tower of London? Were they murdered? Were they hidden? Or did someone protect them secretly? Nobody knows the full truth. And that is why this story is not only a mystery, it is one of the darkest secrets in history. After the mysterious disappearance of Edward V and his younger brother Richard of Shrewsbury, England slowly began to change. New rulers came. New wars started. New stories replaced old ones. But one mystery never disappeared. What really happened inside the Tower of London in 1483? People stopped talking about it openly, but the story never truly ended. Instead, it became something much darker, a secret that everyone knew but nobody could prove. The fall of the king everyone suspected. Only 2 years after becoming king, Richard III lost everything. His rule ended during one of the most important battles in English history. Battle of Bosworth Field. After that battle, Richard III was dead, and a new king took the throne. Many people believed that now the truth about the princes would finally be revealed. But it never was. No official investigation happened. No confession appeared. No proof was found. The mystery remained exactly where it had begun, inside the walls of the Tower of London. The discovery that shocked everyone. Many years later, something happened that made the story even more frightening. Workers inside the Tower of London discovered bones hidden inside the building. Some historians believed the bones belonged to children. Others believed they could belong to the two missing princes. But even after the discovery, the most heartbreaking part of the story is what happened to their mother, Elizabeth Woodville. She never received proof that her sons were dead. She never received an explanation. She never received justice. Instead, she lived the rest of her life not knowing whether her children were alive somewhere, or lost forever. And sometimes, not knowing is worse than the truth. The tower that still holds the secret. Even today, people who visit the Tower of London often remember one story more than any other, the story of the two princes who entered the tower and were never seen again. Historians still debate the mystery. Writers still tell the story. And people who love history still ask the same question again and again. What really happened to the princes in 1483? Even after hundreds of years, historians still believe one of these three possibilities is true. 1. They were secretly murdered. Many historians believe Richard III ordered the murder so no one could challenge his throne. 2. Someone else killed them without the king's permission. Some believe a powerful supporter of the king may have done it secretly to protect him. 3. They were moved somewhere else and died later. A few historians believe the princes were secretly taken away to another place where they lived quietly for some time before dying. But none of these theories have been proven completely. Why this story still feels so dark? What makes this mystery so disturbing is not only the disappearance. It is the silence that followed it. No one confessed.